This is Andrew Stotz of Become a Better Investor. What I want to talk about now is a little bit about forecasting. You see a financial model up on the screen here, and this is of a company, as you can see at the top, called SPOST, Singapore Post. In some ways, it's a very slow-growing company. We can see past revenue growth in 2009, 2010, 11, 12. It was slow, it started to pick up. Now what we're going to do is look at our revenue line right here and our revenue growth forecasting area. You can see that I've separated this by this horizontal bar. How do you get that horizontal bar? You go to View and then Split Screen. I like split screen instead of freeze pane because with split screen, I get the flexibility to be able to move it around, and that gives me a lot more ease of using the screen. So now what we can see is that what I've done in this case is just looked at the growth rate that we can see here from the prior periods. So let's just look at, for instance, 12. So let's imagine that this company is going to grow at 12% over the next 5 years. I'm going to type in 12 and then Control Enter is how I enter it into each one. Now that's given me this new level of revenue we can see growing over time. And next thing we need to think about is the gross margin of this business. This is a mail delivery business, not only delivering mail that is government related, but also private mail delivery. And what we can see is the gross margin has been very high. But as they've expanded and grown, they've had to reduce that gross margin. So let's say that they're going to go down from 60 to 59 and later to 58 as things get more competitive in the distribution business. Let's say that we go to 57 over this period of time. So though we're going to see that revenue is growing quickly, or at 12%, we're going to see actually that the gross profit's going to grow more slowly because of our gross profit margin declining. So the next thing is SG&A, and we can see that after gross profit, we have SG&A, and then we have other expenses. So SG&A, I look at as a percent of sales, not as a growth rate. And this is because if you look at it as a growth rate, sometimes this SG&A can get a little funny. And I want to make sure that no matter what happens to my sales, that the SG&A is tracking that. So we can see that the SG&A does actually track that between 40, 45, down to 41. So let's say that the SG&A, which is sales, general and administrative expenses, are going to be, let's say, 42% of total revenue. Now the next question, and this is a harder one, where we're looking at other operating income. In this case, we don't have the full detail, so we don't know where these numbers come from, but we can see that they're pretty small relative to the overall. One option is to just say minus 100, and we can just remove them. And when we do that, we can see that this gets whited out or zeroed out. So that's one option, but the reality is that really going to be true? So I don't think that that's going to be true. So if we just take our 4 that we have, how about if we just carry that over? And so we say 0 growth, and 0 growth should give us that 4. So we have 0 growth all across, and let's just keep that 4. Since it's a revenue item, I'd rather be conservative in it. Next thing that gives us is our earnings before interest and taxes. And now you can see, I call that the operating margin. That's this line. And we can see a fall from 38, 37, 32, 25. The structure of this business is changing. And what we can see here is that I'm calling for it to change even more as it gets competitive. Now, the fact is that what that means is that they hardly will have growth in their net profit. So I would argue that it could be that they're going to get higher growth in their revenue because they are lowering their prices. So I'm going to change revenue growth to, let's say, 15. So now what I'm going to do is look at the next thing that goes down and say what is happening with interest expenses and other items. Now I can look and see the interest expense that they're paying is about 3%. So interest rates won't be low forever. So let's just increase that to 4, and then eventually let's say that they're going to pay 5% in interest. That's not unreasonable. And how much are they earning? Well, that's the sad story of interest these days. If you have money deposited, you're only earning probably less than 1%. So let's just say they're going to earn 9, and then it's going to go up to 1. After that, we look at non-operating income or expense, and we can see, again, this is a little bit like the operating one, except this is just going to be much more variable. I would be hesitant to do anything with this, so I'm going to reduce it by 50% because I don't know what it's going to be, and I'm going to leave it at that because I just don't know. We would look into that in more detail and try to see if we could come up with a better forecast. So now the next thing we need to do is look at the tax rate. We can see that this company is in Singapore, and it may have its own situation where taxes are going to be different. But I think the best thing to do is just to keep the taxes at about where they are for right now until we can look at it in more detail. So now we can look at, I'm going to move this up, and we can see the earnings before interest after tax, which we can see that margin right here, and we can see a decline in that margin. Now, declining margin is okay if the revenue growth is strong, which I've already increased it. I may increase it more. Now, here is the equity contribution from companies that they own. Right now, I don't have a lot of information on that, so I'm just going to leave that and at this point at about, let's say, 1%. And what am I looking at here? I'm looking at that income divided by the total investments that they have on their balance sheet. And those investments that they have on their balance sheet could be growing. And as they do, even if we don't change this number of 1%, that could be increasing the number in the P&L. So now let's look at foreign exchange gain or loss. And we can see that that is on this line, and it's very tiny, so I don't really know what's best to do here. So what I think I'll do is just leave it the same. And since it is very small, I'm going to leave it just like that. And that brings me down to any exceptional items. They don't have any for them, as we can see, so that's 0. And from that, we can now see our net margin. And yes, our net margin of this company is deteriorating every year after year. A little increase, but then down, down, down. I think that's okay as long as the company is growing. And so that's the situation that we have with this company. We also can just understand the level of minority interest. So this has to do with the situation of the company in relation to investments that it owns and that's not attributable to them. So if I was to change this to 0, let's say, what we would see is this attributable to minority shareholders would turn to 0. Now this is something that we back out to say it's not income that's not attributable to us, but rather it's attributable to the minority. So it's not attributable to Singapore Post. So I'm just going to leave this at -1 just to keep it about the same at this point until we would have more information. And from all of that, we can come up now with a net profit forecast, which I'm going to look at right here, a net profit forecast which goes from 161 to 142 in 2012, 136, then up to 2014, it was at 192, 158, now it's up, 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 and up. Now, of course, real life isn't going to be up, up, and up. We're going to be up and down. But how could you predict what's really going to happen in 2018? Very difficult to do. So we're going to leave it at this, and that is how I forecast the P&L of a company.